In this video, I'm going to give you a blueprint from going from 0 to 8 figures based on my experience scaling 3 8-figure companies. And we're going to break it down into 6 stages. So stage 1 is product market fit. So this is a revenue range of 0 to 30K a month. It can kind of vary, but really what we're looking for is our first 10 to 100 cold purchases. So when I mean cold purchases, I don't mean like your mom bought it, your brother bought it, your cousin bought it. I mean, in some way, shape, or form, somebody went from having no idea who you were to actually purchasing the thing. They're not just like a pity purchase, okay? And so here we want to get that first 10 to 100 purchases. If it's more higher ticket, it could just be 10. If it's like a really low ticket software or something like that, it could be more like 100. And then from there, we also, through getting those purchases, want to get a basic idea of just how to sell the product. So how do we actually do that? Well, the first thing is creating initial offer hypothesis and sales presentation, okay? So think about it like this way. You want to view validating and getting product market fit a lot like the scientific method. So you're going to create a hypothesis of both your offer and then how to actually present that offer to the prospect on a phone or an in-person meeting or however you're selling. And then from there, if it hits or if it resonates, great, we can look at what resonated and double down on that. If it doesn't, we can take that feedback actually from the customer or prospective customer in this case and actually iterate it to make it better. And so if you keep doing that iterative process and you keep listening to the market and what their actual problems are and what they actually want, eventually you're going to end up with something that both is a great business and fits the products or fits the prospects' needs, interests, desires, etc. So that's what I was saying. The second stage is offer and iterate like the scientific method. And then also test lightweight ways to get the initial traffic. So you're probably not going to want to build some complicated marketing funnel or anything like that, or hire like 10 sales reps to do outbound at this stage. But maybe you're doing some initial outreach, you're getting some referrals from affiliates or partners that are easy to get. Maybe you have an existing customer base or you have an existing product, whatever, you're doing referrals that way, or even organic social is a really, really good thing. Just as a lightweight way to get your first 10 to 100 customers depending on your price point. Then we move on to stage 2, which is developing the optimal selling system. If you're familiar with the book Ready, Fire, Aim, it's written by Mark Ford. He's co-owner of Agora, which is a $1.5 billion publishing company. I really got this term from them. And so in this stage, really you're going from 10 to about 100,000 a month. Okay. And generally these ranges, they can vary depending on the business model. If you have an online service-based model selling something over the phone, this is going to be pretty close. If not, you're going to have to kind of maybe take the range one way or another, but about 10 to 100K a month. Okay. So what do we want to do here? We want to develop what I call the conveyor belt. Okay. So really when you want to build a scalable acquisition system for your company, what you're really looking to do is have like a conveyor belt. So what I mean by that is having the same prospect coming in from the same source with the same problems, needing the same solutions, undergoing the same sales process like a conveyor belt every single day, repeated multiple times a day. And when you can do this, a couple things happen. Number one, you have a predictable input versus output system, right? So like the common example is paid ads. If I spend more on paid ads, I'm going to get more on leads, given that my funnel is actually validated. Outbound's another example too. If I have one outbound rep, or if I have 2 outbound reps, let's say, and each of them produce $50,000 a month in upfront revenue, and I scale that to 10, then I'm obviously going to have probably a similar result given all of them are in KPI, but I'm going to get, 5 times what I had with 2 if I go to 10. If they're all also producing 50K a month, I'm going to have 500 grand a month, right? So those 2 systems, and there's multiple systems that are like this, not just outbound and paid ads. There's strategic partnerships and JVs, there's affiliates, there's a lot of stuff. But what we want to look for is if we pull the lever and add more inputs into the system, do we get more outputs, okay? So really at the end of the day, an optimal selling system is a consistent, predictable, reliable, scalable way to generate interest, and then a consistent, predictable, reliable way to convert that interest into sales, okay? So you have to generate the interest, convert the interest. Now, you could do it through generating leads, closing them on sales calls. It could be generating leads, closing them on a live webinar, generating leads, closing them in a live event. It doesn't matter what it is, but you have to have those 2 things. All optimal selling systems have those 2.
Real quick, and then we'll get back to the video. If you need help with any of these 3 things, either installing a lead acquisition internally in your business, you need new sales reps, and you want sales reps recruited done for you, and also get the sales consulting and sales management help that comes with that, or if you just want overall business strategies of how you can scale to 8 figures or beyond, go to the link in the description, click that link, check out the video, and then book a call with our team. We'd love to help you with any of those 3 things. Now back to the video.
So how do we actually do that? Well, something that really helps, which I alluded to just a second ago, is what I call the 3S formula for your offer. So we kind of covered offer a second ago, but this is where you're going to start to refine it. And you're going to refine it even in stage 3 and stage 4 a little bit as well. And so the way I like to think about this is when we have our offer, we want to solve a specific problem for a specific person in a specific way, okay? So specific problem, specific person, that's pretty common sense, right? Like you might solve leads for realtors, okay? That's pretty easy. But what's key, and a lot of people don't have, is the specific way. And what I mean by that is either having a unique selling proposition or having a unique mechanism, okay? But something that makes you and going with you, like why should they go with you, right? What is unique, different, superior, better, faster, easier, whatever about your service or your product compared to the competition? Or what makes your product new and different compared to all other solutions? So a way I like to say this is I like to position whatever I'm selling in my solution as the simultaneous explanation of why everything they tried in the past has failed and why this is going to be different. Okay, so if I'm a marketing company and I'm selling lead generation and I'm selling it to realtors, okay, I want to know what the status quo is. What are most of these people trying and what has most of their experience with agencies been? And then when I'm pitching my product or service, by the very nature of pitching it, I want to explain, okay, yeah, that's why this agency didn't work in the past. They implemented this system. This system's like 10 years out of date, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So instead, what we do is we do this, which allows you to benefit and ultimately benefit. So the basic framework I usually have for this is like what most people out there trying to achieve the result, they're making X, Y, and Z mistake, and it's causing these problems and ultimately these consequences. So instead, what we do is X, Y, and Z feature, which allows you to benefit and ultimately benefit of that benefit. Okay, so that's a problem linking, then benefit linking kind of a language track there. But really what you want to do is why do they go with you? What's unique, different, superior about you? What are most people in the market making mistakes with? And how can you make your solution the simultaneous explanation so that by the nature of you explaining it, they explain why they're not getting results and why this is going to be different, okay? So when you have this, it makes cold acquisition way easier, okay? And again, it's because it gives you the conveyor belt, right? So not only does this help you make your marketing work, like if you have a 3S formula, you're going to be able to have compelling marketing that's new, different, unique, superior, et cetera, which whether you're doing cold outreach or you're doing ads or you're doing anything, that's going to make the marketing work much better. So not only does it do that, but at the same time, it lends to much more of a conveyor belt approach because let's say you're running paid ads with the 3S formula. Okay, you have the same prospects coming in from the same source with the same problems, needing the same solutions, undergoing the same sales process repeatedly multiple times a day. And so imagine how much easier that's going to be for you to train people to take over that process so you can delegate it, okay? So the easiest way to explain this sometimes is to explain the opposite. So like the opposite of this would be like a full service agency. So let's, and granted, you can scale those to 9 figures too. I'm just giving you an example of the opposite of this because most of my clients are small business agencies that work with small businesses. But imagine you're full service and you work with small businesses. Well, you're going to be working with all sorts of different customers from all sorts of different industries, having all sorts of different problems. You know, somebody needs PPC, somebody needs websites, somebody needs Facebook ads, somebody needs Google ads. So all sorts of different problems, which means they undergo a different sales process, more or less almost every single time. And they're getting different solutions every single time. So imagine putting a salesperson and trying to create a scalable sales team out of that process. Is it possible? Yes. Is it ideal? No. Like how much more easier would it be if that salesperson was talking to a realtor coming, or, you know, a brokerage coming from Facebook ads, having the same problem, needing leads, wanting the same solution because your marketing educated them about that solution. Therefore, you can have the same conversation every single time, right? That's why most full service agencies that are really big, they work with big Fortune 500 enterprises because essentially then they can do a huge deal. And even though, yeah, the sales process might be a little bit tough, it's going to be long, the founder might even have to get involved. It's fine because obviously the payoff of the deal and then how long that deal stays on is much, much, much longer. So hopefully that makes sense. So the common pitfall here that people make is focusing way too much on the product, okay? And I'm not saying you shouldn't focus on the product, but in this stage, you don't have really enough customers to get enough feedback to know what a good product is. So really what I see people here do is they, virtue single, like, oh, I'm just focusing on the product, I'm focusing on the product. And it's really just glorified procrastination because they don't want to scale and they have some fear of scaling. Okay, so you have to sort of break the product. You have to get version 1. That's step 1. Then you sort of have to break version 1 to get to version 2. And as we'll talk about in a second, version 2 is really what's going to set you up to scale. And it's really what your like real and good product is, right? Because you've gotten feedback from your initial customers and you've made some very key and major iterations, which brings me to stage 3, which is solidifying the product, okay? So this can be anywhere from 80K a month to 250K a month. Really what happens is you're gonna validate the optimal selling system. You're gonna start to scale a little bit until things start to strain and things in the product start to break, and it'll be very obvious. You'll be like, okay, obviously we need to fix 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 with the product to not only get people better results, but to get it ready to scale, okay? So the outcome of this stage, and just as a recap, stage 1 and 2, they'll show obvious signs in the product. So again, the outcome is to patch 2.0 or basically to create product version 2.0 and prep it ready for scale. And also to remove you from fulfillment if you are involved with fulfillment. So if you're doing some sort of service, to make sure you start to transition that to more of a productized service where people, along with your IP, necessary if you're doing more of an expert-based business, but people along with your IP can facilitate your service or facilitate your IP independent of you having to be involved, right? So 2.0 of the product, remove yourself from fulfillment. So how do you actually do this? Well, again, this is where having that 3S formula from the last step is so important because again, if you have people coming in with the same problems, needing the same solutions every time, imagine how much easier that is to streamline your fulfillment. Okay, so again, the agency is the easiest example. This is why, like, again, if you're going to do Fortune 500, like if you're going to do full service, you have to go with big corporate contracts because then you're going to have a lot of cash flow to be able to hire out and handle a lot of the operational complexity. But if you're doing small business, what you're really going to want to do is have people coming in with the same product needing the same solution. That way, fulfillment is they're fixing the same problem for the same customer every single time. So you can see how much easier it's going to be to streamline it. And I know I'm using agencies as an example, but this goes for any business, whether it's a coaching business, SaaS business, whatever it is. So again, the 3S formula not only helps us market, but helps us streamline fulfillment. We also want to make sure that we have a structured client journey. At this stage, we should be able to clearly map out every stage in the client journey, the onboarding, what the activation points are, what are the key moments of cross-selling, upselling, et cetera. And we also want to start to talk about what's going to be our ascension or our back end if we need to add on another product to ascend people into afterwards for retention and recension. And then also, if it's applicable to you, we need to hire CSMs or some sort of fulfillment staff, right? So if you have a SaaS or an expert-based business where you have people facilitating IP, you're going to need CSMs to actually facilitate that and make sure the clients are getting good results. Or if you have more of a traditional based service business, maybe you just need more cleaners for your cleaning business or whatever it is, okay? So again, when you're building out the CSM and fulfillment structure, what's key is that you have to have a scalable structure to it. So what really was the prerequisite for me when we went through a growth spurt of like 200 grand a month all the way to $1 million a month very quickly. But when I was at 200 grand a month, what I really set in place was a very scalable fulfillment kind of org chart and structure to where I knew if I doubled, tripled, or even quadrupled the amount of customers I was bringing on a month, all I have to do was just hire more CSMs to be able to fulfill on that. So that's what you're kind of looking for in this stage. And then that way you can delegate onboarding, customer service, client success, et cetera. So stage 3.5, and the reason it's 3.5 is it can be before, in conjunction with, or even right after stage 3, which was the product stage, right? So it's kind of all the same thing, right? And this is really removing yourself from sales or removing a founder or whoever the key person is from sales. So again, same revenue range, 80 to 250 grand a month. The outcome is, again, we want to delegate the sales process and get our initial hire in. All right. So how do we do this? Well, number one, we have to standardize the sales process. We kind of talked about that earlier with the 3S formula and so on and so forth. Number two, we need to create a gold standard of what great looks like in the sales process, which means having you, or whoever the person who validated the sales process, have them make sure they have 10, preferably 20 plus textbook gold standard call recordings of them closing deals and then breaking down those deals and those calls, what they were doing, why they were doing it every single step of the way. That way, number one, when we have a gold standard, which we can reference point any new reps to when they're ramping. And then what I do is give those calls to them to train and then have them actually script out what they think the sales process is based on viewing those calls of what is a gold standard of perfection. And then I can look at what they scripted out and actually compare it to what the actual sales process is. So when they do this, they're kind of they're trying to teach me, and by teaching me, they're obviously going to learn more about the process. But number two, it gives me a good reference point of where are they at in their understanding of the sales process versus what it actually is. And then of course, I want to have the sales process mapped out, a training video for that, all of that. Now, in terms of how we ramp reps, I got tons of videos on this channel with training on that. But in the first week, we want to have them shadow/train. Okay. Then we start them with half volume, then full volume. Now, if you were the sales rep and now you're going to be the sales manager for the very first time, here's a big thing that a lot of people miss that if you do is going to make a huge difference. Okay. What happens is when people hire their first sales rep, they're like, oh my God, I'm finally done with sales. I don't want any part of this. Like, you handle the sales now. Good luck. Don't do that. You still have to stay involved. Okay. And so a great way to stay involved, it also makes sure that you're not losing any revenue from passing off, or you're minimizing the lost revenue from passing off the sales, is to do two things. Number one, when you're QCing, and you're going to need to do a lot of QC, which means call reviews, watching your salespeople actually try to close the deals. Anything that is a deal that should have closed, but didn't close or pushed unnecessarily to a follow-up call that prospect and re-engage them. A lot of times, like when I was doing this, I could make a 5 to 10 minute call and collect 10 grand right from that call. Or, whatever my price point was, 10 grand, 20 grand, right from that call. I'd just be like, hey, our salesperson did a pretty good job. I think they missed these key things. If I was you, here is how I would think about your situation, and here's how we would really fit in. And then boom, I'm right back into the close. And within like a lot of times 10, 15 minutes, I can honestly process payment, or at least set them up with a call with us tag teaming where I know I'm going to get the sale. So that's number one. Number two is your salesperson can also use you as kind of bait to really just get prospects across the line. So especially when the salesperson's ramping, they may have certain prospects where they don't exactly know what to pitch, or for whatever reason, they kind of get later on in the sales process and they get stuck. They can still pitch, and maybe after the initial call, or even after the first follow-up call, they can set that prospect up with you to be able to actually kind of get the close. A lot of times, and look, if you're the owner or the manager of the team or whatever, it's not even like you have to do that much different on that call. It's just that prospect getting a second face a lot of times can just kind of get them across the line, and you can kind of tidy up any loose ends. So those are ways where, a lot of founders, when they delegate the sales calls, they might be, let's say, doing 200 grand a month all by themselves. They're like, man, what if the sales rep only does 100 or 125? I'm going to take a huge hit. This is a way you can really minimize that revenue. And the last thing is establishing the big three, which I have trainings on this in the channel as well. But then you need to run daily sales meetings. You need to do QC, and you need to have proper tracking and end-of-day reports. So that's that's another videos in the channel we can link to below this video. But you have to do the big three. The common pitfalls is number one, poor management. We already covered that. But number two is jumping the gun. So hiring too quickly if you don't have the lead flow to support a salesperson, or if you just haven't really validated your sales process yet, then you're not really setting a sales rep up to succeed. Okay. Stage 4 is mastering management. So this is a revenue range from 200 to about 800,000 a month. And as a recap, at this stage, we have scalable leads, predictable sales, and those sales don't depend on you. We have a productized and streamlined fulfillment. In other words, scalable fulfillment. And we have some sort of retention and ascension process to increase our LTV. Okay, so we have all of that in place. So now the outcome is you're going to be spending 90% of your time finding and developing frontlines employees. So like new sales reps, new CSMs, certain ops people, maybe a controller, but certain frontlines employees, and really developing those people. So remember this saying, the quality of your business is the quality of what happens on the front lines. So think about all of the customer interfacing parts of your business. That's really what dictates the quality of your business, okay? So in the beginning, you're doing all of those things, so it's really just about you. But when you have sales reps, CSMs, when you have copywriters writing the marketing, media buyers buying the media, they're really dictating what that front lines experience is. So to increase the quality of the business and the efficiency of the business, we need to pour our time into them and do a lot of QC, a lot of training, and a lot of development with those front lines employees. So this is kind of like almost, in my mind, I always think about it as the Elon Musk style of management. It's a flat management structure. You're the primary manager of the business at this stage, and you're just pouring in to almost every department. Like you're the GM, and it's almost all flat, all frontlines employees. Now, gradually, as we get into the next stages, we're going to start to promote some leaders. But right now, everything is frontline. So what we want to do is get these frontline positions to peak performance and identify future leaders and managers that we can move up later, because that's the next stage we're going to go into. So how do we actually do this? Well, first of all, it's creating a good mission, vision, and values. Now, I used to think this is for big corporations and like, this stuff didn't matter, but this is huge, okay? So I'll give you an example. Like with our mission, vision, and values, we send a 2-pager that details basically our mission, vision, and values to candidates who are looking to work with us in between interview 1 and interview 2. And oftentimes the feedback we get back from them is like, they're like, man, I was like pretty certain I wanted to work here, but after going through that, I'm like, I have to work at this company. Like there's, like this is just like 100%, like I got to figure out a way to work here. Like it totally sells them. And that's why I call mission, vision, and values. It's like the sales letter for the recruitment of your business, if that makes sense. So the way I like to think about it is the vision is the challenging destination that we're all going. The mission is why we're going to that destination. The values is our standard of behavior on the journey of going where we're going. And so really, really good books to read about this is anything about Amazon and Jeff Bezos. That's inspired me a lot here. Same thing with Google. So that'll give you a lot of good inspiration of how to build yours if you don't have it. You're also going to have to run great meetings and one-on-ones. You have to recruit A+ level talent, and I would just hire really good people from the start, overpay them. They're going to make a huge difference. But the main name of the game is a lot of QC. So if you're training the sales team, a lot of call reviews. If you're training the client success team, call reviews on their onboarding calls, call reviews on their coaching calls. If you have people doing the marketing for you at this stage, maybe you do, maybe you don't, making sure you copy chief all of the copy, all of the creatives, all of that stuff. So really, it's all about pouring in and having that standard of gold, like that gold standard of what you perceive this should look like, and making that very clear to everybody, and then always referencing people against that baseline and trying to get them as close to that gold standard of performance as you possibly can. So the biggest pitfall here is that because it involves so much QC as entrepreneurs, it's very boring. Entrepreneurs, what they want to do a lot of times is just make new stuff. New products, new campaigns, new webinars, new marketing, whatever, especially like internet-based entrepreneurs, they want to innovate, okay? This is where you don't need to innovate. You just need to double down and do more of what's already working. And a lot of that means hiring, training, managing new people, and just pouring into QC, okay? So, but it's boring, which a lot of people avoid it because it's boring, unfortunately. As Hormozi would say, another big pitfall, and I just kind of mentioned this, but Hormozi talks about more, better, new, or new, better, more, what have you. A lot of people, again, they try to do new opposed to doing better and do more, okay? The other thing is just not realizing that leadership, like, look, nobody was born a great leader or a great manager. These are skills, just like selling, just like running ads, just like writing copy, just like any skill. These are skills that you have to build, okay? So a big mishap in this stage is just entrepreneurs not leaning in to realizing, I got to really become a great leader. I got to learn what being a great leader means. I got to learn how to become a great manager. I got to learn these skills. So, and then finally, a very funny one that I see all the time is, starting to get all this operational complexity in your business. And then instead of actually just learning in and learning the skills, you're like, no, I need an integrator that's just going to come in and just do all the stuff. It's just not realistic, okay? I'm not saying a COO, a great integrator, is a bad thing, but it's usually the mindset that people have, oh, I need this COO and integrator to come in. They're just going to fix all of my problems. It's just not realistic, and you're not even setting that person up to succeed. If this is what you really need, what this really is like a business partner who is going to handle like the business side and the operations while you handle more of like the marketing, product, and innovation. Okay, that's what you really need if that's what you really want. But most times people just they over pendulum swing there. And at the end of the day, they can really get away with just learning the skills.
Real quick, and then we'll get back to the video. If you need help with any of these 3 things, either installing a lead acquisition internally in your business, you need new sales reps, and you want sales reps recruited done for you, and also get the sales consulting and sales management help that comes with that. Or if you just want overall business strategies of how you can scale to 8 figures and beyond, go to the link in the description, click that link, check out the video, and then book a call with our team. We'd love to help you with any of those 3 things. Now back to the video.
Okay, so stage 5 is building your C-suite, okay? So this is very similar to stage 4, it's just one level above. So the revenue range here is $600K a month to $2 million a month plus. So the outcome here is pretty simple, pretty standard. You need to gradually build your client success director, your sales director, your CMO, your CFO, and whatever other departmental leaders that you're going to need for your company. So how do I actually do this? Well, the biggest thing is it's going to take a massive upgrade in your recruiting skills. So a lot of people who are previous entrepreneurs who have come work for me, they say that one of the things I am best at, which I wasn't even aware of this until I was told this multiple times, is that I'm very, very good at recruiting extremely high-level leaders and bringing them into the company. So you need a massive upgrade in your recruiting skills. And a great way to think about this is another thing one of my employees told me, is that, to get to 7 figures, you could probably do that yourself. To get to 8 figures, you need yourself, and you need a few probably 7-figure entrepreneur type people. And then to get to 9 figures, what I would imagine, even though I'm not at 9 figures, is that you probably need a lot of 7-figure people and then even a few 8-figure people, okay? And when I say 7-figure people and 8-figure people, I'm not saying like, a lot of people go right towards, okay, well, how do I take somebody who has a 7-figure business and convince them to work for me? That's not what I'm really saying. I'm saying like, there's people on your team, and if you have a high-level team, you'll know what I'm talking about. You'll have people on your team where you're like, man, if that person probably went out on their own, they could probably create a 7-figure business. Oh man, if that person went out on their own, eventually they'd probably create an 8-figure business. That doesn't mean that they want to. That doesn't mean their lifestyle and their values coincide with that and they have the risk tolerance for it. But I'm saying from a pure capability and skill set standpoint, that's how I like to think about it. It's like, if you want to get to 8 figures, you need to be an 8-figure entrepreneur, and you probably need quite a few 7-figure entrepreneurs who are also helping you really drive the revenue for the company. If you want to get to 9 figures, it's probably a few 8-figure people and a few 7-figure people. So hopefully that makes sense. That's a big, that's really helped a lot of my clients kind of like up the level of recruiting and what they think is good that they actually need. Now, to be able to recruit those people, what you have to do, obviously, is expand your vision big enough to where they can fit their vision inside of it. So a lot of these people, they're going to want some upside, right? And so they're not going to get the same upside as you, but they need some way where they can kind of look at, okay, this is me kind of scaling my business under the business. And then most importantly, you have to expand yourself, because if you're not somebody that they want to learn from or feel like they can learn from, then why would they want to work for you? Okay, so they have to feel like, whether it's through you or through the culture and environment that you created, they're going to grow way more than they would otherwise not working for you. Okay, so that's a big way. Like, a lot of people take pay cuts to come work for us because we've created that environment of growth, and they believe, okay, I'm going to grow here over the next 3 years way more than I would starting my own business or working with a position where I could make 20% more. So I'm going to work here. Now, we also pay a lot, but sometimes we can't pay what they could make otherwise, and they'll take a pay cut. So the other big thing is learning how to lead leaders, right? Because that's basically what you're doing now. Now you have a set of middle management between you and the front lines. So one of the key things here is it's a volume knob, not a light switch. So what a lot of people do is like, they get in their head, okay, I need to hire a sales director. So then they hire a sales director, and it's like black and white. They just hire him, throw him in. It's like, I got a sales director now. You handle this. I'm going to be CEO. Okay, it's not really like that. Like, if I'm the current sales director and I want to remove myself from sales director and put somebody else in, it's a volume knob, not a light switch. So how that might look is, okay, great. I have a salesperson who's really, really good. I think they have the capabilities. I'm going to promote them as sales lead, give them they're still on calls, give them a little bit of management activities to do here and there, and just kind of see how they do, see how their call reviews sound, see how they're, if I give them one meeting here and there, see how they lead the meeting, give them a lot of feedback on that. That might be a couple of month process. Then I might move them to manager, but we might co-manage for a little bit. So then I might give them, hey, I'm going to run all the meetings, but you do all the one-on-ones, or I'll do one-on-ones bi-weekly, you do one-on-ones bi-weekly, I'll review your one-on-ones, you'll do more call reviews, and I'll keep reviewing those, and then I might start to slowly give them another responsibility, to the point where eventually they are doing it. But by the time they are doing all of it, I'm extremely confident that they can do it because I've slow rolled them into the process. So just keep in mind, like, when you're really upgrading or promoting leaders, especially internally, or even bringing in external leaders, it can take a 4 to 9 month ramp. That's statistically, like, look it up. Like, there's studies that actually show that that's the average in corporations. It can take a while, which sucks. We want the position right now. We want to rush it, but you can. So a lot of times you have to slow roll, and that's usually going to be the best thing. And it mitigates the most risk for you, that you're not going to put somebody in an apartment and then 3 months later, the apartment's in absolute shambles because they dropped the ball and then you weren't involved at all. So the volume knob, not a light switch, that's a big thing. Make sure the same way as it was when you were delegating the front line stuff, you need a clear golden standard of what performance looks like. So again, if I'm hiring a sales director, they should be very, very clear of what perfection looks like as being a sales director. Here's exactly what the meeting should sound like, exactly what the one-on-one sound like. Here's exactly what your call review should sound like. And when you have that, then you need to QC against that gold standard. So in other words, QC their QC. So some of it, is easy. Like you can QC the one-on-ones they're doing with their team. You can QC the sales meetings that they're doing. I'm staying with the sales director example here. But also, like if they're doing call reviews, which is QC, you can QC their QC and see how well their feedback aligns with your feedback. Okay? So you can do this with everything. We do this with our recruiting department. We do this with our client success department. I like to use sales as an example because it's very easy to understand because a lot of it's just so much QC. But again, it's volume on the light switch, establish the gold standard performance, QC against a QC, their QC. So common pitfalls here. Most people just hire terrible people, okay? Like they're okay at hiring the front lines people, but once they get to like the leaders and the managers, they just like their perception of how good of a person that they need is just way too low. Okay. And a lot of times when those same people come work for me, maybe they shut down their business, come work for me, they're like, oh, like I didn't realize like your managers and your leaders are like ridiculous. Like they're way better than the people that I had by like a multiple of like 10. Okay. So terrible recruitment's one. The other thing is just terrible training, which I already alluded to earlier. Like what you don't want to do is, okay, you're the leader now. Good luck. We'll meet once a week. That's just, it's a volume knob, not a light switch. So a lot of people just throw people in there and they're like, thank God somebody else is doing it. It's your problem now. I'm out. Don't do that. Okay. The final stage is replication. Okay. So this is a revenue range between 30 million a year to 100 million a year plus. It starts to get a little murky here because it really depends on when you hit critical mass with one product. So if you have a software, this is going to be way higher than, let's say, if you have a service business or an info business or something like that. But the outcome here is if and when your current system hits critical mass, you need to create new business units and profit centers all within the same business, okay? So it's not about creating new businesses or even new products. But here's how I like to think about it. It's how many new ways can I create to sell the same product? So I'll give you an example. So like in the beginning, you have marketing, sales, fulfillment, ascension, and retention, right? So maybe you run one funnel on ads to a sales team. They sell them, it goes into your fulfillment process, and then, eventually you try to upsell them and retain them on whatever you're doing, right? So it's very linear. Now you want to push this as far as you can go because the simplicity is great. Maybe at a certain point you kind of diversify the channels slightly. Like if you're on Facebook, maybe do a little bit of like YouTube ads or something like that. But generally, like you want to take that one system, push it to the break, okay? But eventually what's going to happen is you're going to get some diminishing returns where it's whether, the efficiency's down, the ad costs are high, or it just feels like, man, like the same amount of effort, I only get a 5% return opposed to what I used to get a 20, 30, 40, 50% return. Then you want to do this, okay? And so basically, this is kind of what we're doing with our company now. Obviously, we're not at 100 million a year, so this is the stage that I'm in currently, is we have multiple business units. So we have marketing funnel 1 going to a certain industry with a separate sales team, marketing funnel 2 going to an entirely different industry with a separate sales team. We have our outbound division, which goes after certain industries to a separate sales team. And then we have our partnerships, sponsorships, events, and JVs, which also goes to a certain sales team. Okay. Now this one, just to be completely candid, this one right now, we don't have a separate sales team for this. So we're kind of using one of the sales teams to double up, but eventually it's going to be a small unit of event-based and sponsorship-based salespeople doing our JVs and sponsorships. So what's key here is with each of these, you need one leader who is kind of like the entrepreneur and is creating a business under your business. So if each of these divisions count on you personally to drive the revenue, it's not going to work. You need people who can drive the revenue independent of you, which means you have to recruit phenomenal people and then give them basically unlimited upside, okay? More or less. And so what happens here is, I'll give you an example. I basically invested 50% and controlled 50% equity in a health and medical spa type company with one location doing $50K a month. We took that from $50K a month to $3 million a month at 6 locations in 14 months. The way I scaled that so fast was I actually had 3 different business units almost within the first like 6 months. And so we created 3 different business units, all the same fulfillment and ascension retention structure with 3 different business units. And they each had 3 different entrepreneurial kind of like CEOs. And that's how we were just able to explode, because every single one went to $1 million a month, basically. And so what I learned doing that experience is I probably should have done that for this business, Closers.io. I could have built that internally, which is exactly what I'm doing now to take closers to the next level. And so it's having these different business units. Now, in certain times, like this is where maybe mergers and acquisitions could make sense, et cetera. But for now, everything, all these business units, they go to this fulfillment and then they go to this ascension and retention. So again, the big common pitfall here is what happens is when people top off and they hit this critical mass point, they start a new business. And they're like, well, I have a portfolio of businesses now. The issue with that is instead of having 1 fulfillment and 1 ascension and retention, now you have 2, okay? And the more, like I can tell you from experience is the mistake I had 3 businesses all together doing $7 million a month at the beginning of this year in 2024. And there was so much complexity, so much stress, and it pulled me in so many different ways where I felt like I couldn't do any one thing effectively. And what I realized is I could have taken all of that amazing talent and really put them into one umbrella with several different business units, several different businesses within the business, and allowed them to all scale up one umbrella, one company, one fulfillment, one ascension and retention, all of that, and created one extraordinary company opposed to 3 pretty good companies. So hopefully that makes sense. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. See you in the next video.